The air was thick with the stench of decay, a miasma that clung to the cobblestone streets of London like a curse. It was 1665, and the city writhed under the grip of the Great Plague, its people teetering between despair and delirium. Church bells tolled endlessly, their mournful clang a requiem for the dead, while cries of "Bring out your dead" echoed through the narrow alleys. In this chaos, where superstition reigned and death was a neighbor, no one could have expected the arrival of a woman who didn't belong a woman from a time far beyond their own. Sarah Whitaker, a 34-year-old ER doctor from Boston, had been in the middle of a grueling night shift at Massachusetts General Hospital. One moment, she was racing to stabilize a patient, her hands steady despite the chaos of beeping monitors and shouting nurses. The next, a blinding flash enveloped her, a strange hum vibrating through her bones. When her vision cleared, she was no longer in the sterile fluorescence of the hospital. Instead, she stood in a muddy street, surrounded by timber-framed houses leaning precariously over her, their windows dark with grime. The air assaulted her senses wrought, smoke, and something sour she couldn't place. Her scrubs, still splattered with blood from her last patient, drew stares from passers-by in coarse woolen cloaks and wide-brimmed hats. A man with a face like weathered leather spat at her feet, muttering, "Witch." Sarah's heart pounded, her mind scrambling to make sense of the impossible. She wasn't dreaming the gritty reality of the street, the weight of her sneakers sinking into the muck. The sheer wrongness of it all was too vivid. She stumbled forward, clutching her stethoscope like a lifeline, her sharp green eyes scanning the crowd. People moved like ghosts, their faces gaunt, some marked with the telltale black sores of the plague. A woman wailed nearby, clutching a lifeless child, while a cart piled high with bodies rumbled past, its driver masked in a grotesque beak-like contraption. Sarah's medical training kicked in, her shock giving way to a grim realization. She was in the middle of a plague-ridden hellscape. "Where the hell am I?" she whispered, her Boston accent cutting through the murmurs of the crowd. A toothless old woman overheard, her eyes narrowing. "Ye speak strange, lass. Be ye from the New World?" Sarah froze. The New World? Her mind raced 1665, London, the Great Plague, history class fragments pieced together in her head. This was the Black Death's brutal encore, a time when medicine was little more than leeches and prayers. She'd somehow been flung back over 3 centuries into a world that would kill her if she didn't think fast. Her first instinct was to run, to find a way back to her time, but the sight of a young boy coughing violently, his mother pleading for help, stopped her cold. Sarah knelt beside them, ignoring the gasps of onlookers. "Hey, kid, look at me," she said softly, her voice steady despite the chaos. The boy's fevered eyes met hers, his breath shallow. She pressed her fingers to his wrist, counting his pulse too fast, too weak. Plague symptoms flashed through her mind: fever, swollen lymph nodes, delirium. She needed to isolate him, clean the wounds, hydrate him. But here, in this filthy street with no supplies? "Miss, ye can't touch him," the mother shrieked, pulling the boy away. "The miasma'll take ye too." Sarah bit back her frustration. Miasmith old belief that bad air caused disease. She needed to tread carefully. These people didn't know germs, didn't know hygiene. "I'm a doctor," she said, raising her hands to calm the woman. "I can help him, but we need to get him somewhere clean, away from others." The word doctor drew a ripple of whispers. A man in a tattered cloak sneered. "A woman doctor? From the colonies, no less. What devilry be this?" Sarah stood, brushing dirt from her scrubs, her confidence masking her fear. "Call it what you want, but I know how to save lives. You want your kid to live? Listen to me." Her no-nonsense tone, honed from years in the ER, silenced the crowd for a moment. The mother hesitated, then nodded, desperation overriding suspicion. Sarah guided them to a nearby tavern, its sign creaking in the wind. Inside, the air was stale with ale and sweat, but it was better than the street. She cleared a table, barking orders like she was back in Boston. "Boil water, get me clean cloth, and keep everyone else out." The tavern keeper, a burly man named Tom Jenkins, watched her with a mix of awe and suspicion. "Ye move like ye command the place, lass," he grunted, but he obeyed, fetching a kettle. Sarah worked fast, tearing strips from her own scrubs to make bandages, using the boiled water to clean the boy's sores. She explained as she went, her voice a blend of authority and warmth. The sickness spreads through touch, through dirt. Washing hands, keeping things clean it, stops it. The mother, whose name was Mary, stared as if Sarah had sprouted wings. "Washin' hands? That's madness." Sarah grinned, a spark of her old humor breaking through. "Trust me, Mary, it's not madness, it's science." The word felt alien here, a secret she'd have to guard. As she worked, a small crowd gathered at the tavern door, drawn by rumors of a strange woman healing with colonial magic. Sarah ignored them, focusing on the boy. His fever was high, but she'd caught him early. If she could keep him hydrated and isolated, he had a chance. By nightfall, the boy was stable, sleeping fitfully on a makeshift bed of straw. Mary wept, clutching Sarah's hand. "You're a miracle, mistress." Sarah shook her head, exhausted but resolute. "No miracles, just medicine." But the crowd outside wasn't so easily convinced. Whispers of witch and sorceress grew louder, and Sarah caught sight of a man in a dark robe watching her from the shadows, his eyes glinting with malice. Tom leaned close, his voice low. "That's Ezekiel Black, the local cunning man. He don't take kindly to folk stealin' his trade." Sarah's stomach twisted. A cunning man, part healer, part charlatan, all trouble. She'd seen enough of his kind in history books to know he'd be a problem. But before she could respond, a commotion erupted outside. A woman burst into the tavern, her face streaked with tears. "Mistress Doctor, my husband, he's dying. The plague's got him." Sarah grabbed her stethoscope, her fatigue forgotten. "Take me to him." The woman led her through winding streets to a cramped house where a man lay writhing on a straw pallet, his neck swollen with buboes. The room reeked of death, and Sarah's heart sank. This was advanced, likely too late. Still, she tried, instructing the family to boil water and isolate themselves. As she worked, the crowd followed, their murmurs growing bolder. "She touches the sick and lives," one woman gasped. "She's no witch, she's sent by God," another cried. Sarah ignored them, but Ezekiel Black's voice cut through the din, sharp and venomous. "Beware, good folk, this woman's arts are unnatural. She defies the Lord's will." Sarah spun to face him, her temper flaring. "Unnatural? I'm saving lives while you peddle prayers and herbs that don't work." The crowd gasped, and Ezekiel's face darkened. "You'll regret that, colonial," he hissed, vanishing into the night. Sarah turned back to her patient, but the seed of dread had been planted. She was making enemies, And in this superstitious world, that was a dangerous game. Over the next few days, Sarah became a reluctant legend. She moved from house to house, teaching basic hygiene, hand washing, boiling water, isolating the sick. Her strange tools, like the stethoscope, fascinated the locals, who dubbed it her magic ear. Her scrubs, now tattered, were replaced with a borrowed wool dress, though she kept her sneakers, their rubber soles, a secret rebellion against this time. She even found humor in the chaos, joking about the doctor's beaked masks. "What's with the cosplay?" she'd quipped to Tom, who'd roared with laughter, not understanding the word, but loving her audacity. Yet the city was a powder keg. The plague claimed more lives daily, and fear bred suspicion. Sarah's methods worked. Families she treated survived at higher rates, but her foreignness and confidence drew scrutiny. Ezekiel Black spread rumors, claiming her cleanliness was a devil's trick. One night, as Sarah collapsed onto a straw mattress in the tavern, Tom warned her, "Their colony is saint in some quarters, a witch in others. You need to watch your back." Sarah nodded, her mind racing. She didn't belong here, but she couldn't abandon these people. Every life she saved felt like defiance against this brutal era. Yet deep down, she yearned for home, for coffee, for her apartment overlooking the Charles River, for a world that understood her. As she drifted to sleep, a strange sound haunted her dreams, a mechanical hum, faint but unmistakable, like the one that had brought her here. Was it real, or just her mind clinging to hope? The next morning, everything changed. A man in fine velvet, flanked by armed guards, stormed into the tavern. "Sarah Whitaker?" he barked. She nodded, wary. "I'm Alderman John Harrow, deputy to the Lord Mayor. Your name's on every tongue in this ward. They say ye heal the plague." Sarah straightened, sensing a trap. "I'm doing what I can." Harrow's eyes narrowed. "Then you'll do more. The mayor's given you 5 days to stop the plague in this ward. Succeed, and you'll be rewarded. Fail, and you'll burn as a witch." Sarah's blood ran cold. 5 days to stop a plague with no lab, no antibiotics, no support? It was impossible. Yet as Harrow's men loomed over her, she saw the faces of the people she'd saved. Mary, the boy, countless others. She couldn't run. Not now. "Fine," she said, her voice steel. "But I'll need help supplies, men. A place to work," Harrow smirked. "You'll have what I deem fit. Don't test me, Colonial." As he left, Sarah felt the weight of the city pressing down on her. She was a doctor, not a miracle worker, but she'd be damned if she didn't try. The hum from her dreams lingered in her mind, a tantalizing clue to her escape. But first, she had a plague to fight, a cunning man to outwit, and a city to save. London, 1665, had no idea what it was in for. The dawn broke over London like a fever, casting a sickly pallor across the city's jumbled rooftops. Sarah Whitaker stood in the doorway of the Rose and Crown Tavern, her borrowed wool dress itching against her skin, her sneakers caked with mud. The weight of Alderman Harrow's ultimatum pressed on her chest. 5 days to curb the plague in this ward, or she'd face the pyre. The air buzzed with the city's desperation, wails of the bereaved, the creak of death carts, the distant toll of church bells. Yet Sarah's mind was a storm of resolve and defiance. She was a Boston ER doctor, trained to thrive in chaos. If 1665 thought it could break her, it was about to learn otherwise. Inside the tavern, Tom Jenkins, the burly keeper, had rallied a makeshift crew at Sarah's command. There was Mary, the mother whose son Sarah had saved, her eyes fierce with loyalty. Will, a wiry apprentice baker with a quick wit, and Eliza, a sharp-tongued seamstress who'd taken to Sarah's colonial ways with grudging admiration. They gathered around a scarred oak table, watching Sarah sketch plans on a scrap of parchment with a quill she barely knew how to use. "We need 3 things," she said, her voice steady, her Boston accent crisp against the room's smoky haze. "Isolation, hygiene, and medicine. We turn this tavern into a quarantine hub, no one in or out without washing hands and clothes. And we need to boil everything. Water, bandages, tools." Will snorted, scratching his mop of brown hair. "Boilin' water? You sound like a mad alchemist, mistress." Sarah grinned, her green eyes glinting with mischief. "Call it alchemy if you want, kid. It's how we stop this plague from eating the city alive." Eliza leaned forward, her fingers tracing the parchment. "And these medicines? You mean herbs? Leeches?" Sarah shook her head, her mind racing through her medical knowledge, limited by this era's tools. "No leeches. We'll make salve-shunny, garlic, anything antimicrobial I can scrape together. It's not penicillin, but it'll help." The crew nodded, caught in her orbit. Sarah's confidence was infectious, her blend of humor and authority a beacon in their fear-soaked world. But as she assigned tasks, Will to fetch firewood, Mary to organize bedding, Eliza to sew masks from linen doubt, gnawed at her. She was improvising with 17th century scraps, her modern training a double-edged sword. Germ theory was centuries away. Even the word bacteria would sound like witchcraft here. And Ezekiel Black, the cunning man, was out there, poisoning minds against her. She'd seen his robed figure lurking near the tavern, his whispers turning neighbors into spies. By midday, the tavern buzzed with activity. Sarah had transformed the back room into a makeshift clinic, its straw-strewn floor swept clean, tables lined with steaming kettles. She taught her team to scrub their hands raw, ignoring their grumbles. "This is how we fight the invisible enemy," she said, holding up her reddened palms. "No miasma, no curses, just dirt. You can't see." Mary, tying a linen mask over her face, muttered, "Ye talk like a preacher, but I trust ye." Sarah laughed, adjusting her own mask. "Good. Now let's get to work." Word of the colonial doctor spread like wildfire, drawing the sick and curious to the tavern. Sarah triaged patients with a speed honed in Boston's ER, her stethoscoper, magic ear, a source of awe. She separated the infected from the healthy, sending the worst cases to an abandoned warehouse nearby, which she dubbed Massachusetts Ward in a private nod to home. Her methods worked. Families who followed her rules saw fewer deaths, but the city's desperation made her a lightning rod. Some called her a saint, leaving offerings of bread and ale at the tavern door. Others, swayed by Ezekiel, spat curses, claiming her cleanliness defied God's will. Sarah's humor kept her grounded. When a local doctor, clad in a beaked mask stuffed with herbs, visited to inspect her work, she couldn't resist. "Nice cosplay," she quipped, gesturing at his mask. "Does it come with a manual?" The doctor sputtered, uncomprehending, but Tom roared with laughter, slapping his thigh. "Cosplay? Oh, mistress, you're a rare one." The moment lightened the room, but Sarah felt the tension beneath it. The doctor left with a scowl, muttering about unnatural women. She knew he'd report to Ezekiel or worse, to Harrow. That night, as Sarah mixed a salve of crushed garlic and honey by candlelight, Eliza slipped into the clinic, her face pale. "Trouble's brewin'," she whispered. "Ezekiel's holding a meetin' at the church. Says you're a witch, stealin' souls with your strange ways." Sarah's jaw tightened. She'd faced skeptics before, arrogant surgeons, dismissive administrators, but this was different. Ezekiel wasn't just a critic. He was a predator, feeding on the city's fear. "Let him talk," she said, though her stomach churned. "We've got lives to save." But Ezekiel's words were venom, and they spread fast. The next morning, a mob gathered outside the tavern, their shouts a mix of anger and desperation. "Witch!" a man bellowed, hurling a stone that shattered a window. "Ye bring the plague, not cure it!" Sarah peeked through the shutters, her heart racing. The crowd was small but volatile, egged on by Ezekiel, who stood at its center, his dark robe billowing like a vulture's wings. "Good folk," he cried, his voice oily with conviction. "This colonial defies the Lord. Her cleanliness mocks his judgment. Cast her out." Sarah's crew rallied around her, Tom clutching a cudgel, Mary brandishing a broom. But Sarah stepped forward, her voice cutting through the din. "You want to talk judgment?" she shouted, flinging open the door. "Look at your hands, Ezekiel. Filthy! You're spreading the plague, not me." The crowd faltered, caught off guard by her audacity. Ezekiel's eyes narrowed, but Sarah pressed on, her ER-honed bravado in full force. "I've saved dozens in this ward. Your prayers haven't. You want to stop the plague? Join me or get out of my way." For a moment, the mob wavered, some murmuring in her favor. But Ezekiel was no amateur. He raised a hand, silencing them. "Ye speak boldly, woman, but you'll answer to Godand, to the mayor." He turned to the crowd, his voice rising. "She claims to heal, but her arts are devilry. Who's with me?" A few cheered, but others hesitated, glancing at Sarah. She'd planted a seed of doubt, and it infuriated Ezekiel. He stormed off, his followers trailing, but Sarah knew this was only a skirmish. The war was far from over. The next 2 days were a blur of work and worry. Sarah's quarantine hub grew, with more families adopting her methods. She trained Will to make salves, his baker's precision a surprising asset. Eliza's masks became a symbol of hope, their linen squares fluttering across the ward. But the plague was relentless, and Sarah's supplies dwindled. Honey was scarce, clean water a luxury. Worse, Harrow's deadline loomed, and Ezekiel's influence festered. Rumors swirled that he'd petitioned the mayor to arrest her, claiming her success was a demonic pact. On the 4th night, as Sarah collapsed onto her straw mattress, a soft knock startled her. It was Will, his face flushed with excitement. "Mistress, come quick! I found something." He led her to a derelict stable behind the tavern, where a tarp covered a strange object. Sarah's breath caught as Will pulled it back, revealing a glinting metal contraption, its surface etched with symbols she didn't recognize. Gears and wires protruded from its frame, and a faint hum pulsed from within, the same hum she'd heard in her dreams. "What in God's name?" she whispered, her fingers brushing its cold surface. Was this the core mythoigion she'd been brought here by? Before she could process it, a shout rang out. "Fire!" Sarah spun, her heart lurching. Smoke billowed from the tavern's roof, flames licking the timbers. The mob had returned, torches in hand, Ezekiel at their head. "Burn the witch!" he roared, his face twisted with triumph. Sarah's crew scrambled to douse the flames, but the mob pressed closer, their chants a deafening tide. Sarah grabbed Will, her mind racing. The machine, the fire, the deadline, everything was colliding. She had one day left to save the ward, and now her sanctuary was burning. "Get everyone out!" she shouted, shoving Will toward the tavern. As she ran to join them, Ezekiel's voice followed her, a venomous promise. "Ye can't escape judgment, Colonial." Sarah's blood boiled, but she pushed it down. She was a doctor, a fighter, a survivor. She'd save her people, outwit Ezekiel, and uncover the machine's secrets. London, 1665, was her battlefield now, and she wasn't going down without a fight. The night sky over London blazed orange, the Rose and Crown Tavern wreathed in flames that licked hungrily at its timber frame. Sarah Whitaker's heart thundered as she sprinted toward the inferno, her sneakers slipping on the slick cobblestones. The mob's chants, "Burn the witch!" echoed like a war drum, led by Ezekiel Black's venomous voice. Her crew Tom, Mary, Will, and Elizabeth to save their sanctuary, hauling buckets of water from a nearby well, their faces streaked with soot and desperation. Sarah's mind raced, torn between the fire, the mysterious machine she'd glimpsed in the stable, and Alderman Harrow's ultimatum: one day left to stop the plague in this ward, or she'd face the pyre. Boston's ER chaos had nothing on this. "Tom, get the sick out the back!" Sarah shouted, her voice hoarse over the crackle of flames. The burly tavern keeper nodded, shoving through the smoke to guide patients from the makeshift clinic. Mary and Eliza herded families to safety, while Will, his baker's hands trembling, doused a blazing beam with water. Sarah dove into the fray, her wool dress heavy with sweat, her stethoscope bouncing against her chest. The tavern was her lifeline, her quarantine hub, her proof she could save lives. Losing it now, with Harrow's deadline looming, was unthinkable. But Ezekiel's mob wasn't done. A group of torch-wielding men blocked the street, their eyes wild with fear and fury. "Ye brought this curse, Colonial," a bearded man bellowed, hurling a stone that grazed Sarah's shoulder. She winced, but stood her ground, her green eyes blazing. "You want a curse?" she snapped, her Boston accent sharp. "Look at your hands, filthy. You're killing your own with ignorance." The crowd faltered, some glancing at their grime-streaked palms. But Ezekiel stepped forward, his robe billowing like a storm cloud. "Lies!" he roared. "Ye mock God's will. This fire is his judgment." Sarah's temper flared, but a scream from Eliza cut through the chaos. "The roof's collapsin'!" Sarah spun, her stomach lurching as beams groaned and fell, sending sparks skyward. She grabbed Will, shoving him toward the stable. "Get to that machine, guard it." The boy nodded, vanishing into the shadows. Sarah turned back to the tavern, plunging into the smoke to help Tom drag out the last patients. Her lungs burned, but she moved with ER precision, barking orders like she was back at Massachusetts General. "Mary, keep the kids clear. Eliza, more water now." By sheer will, they saved the sick, but the tavern was lost. As the roof caved in, a collective wail rose from the crowd, some weeping for the saint they'd turned against. Sarah stumbled into the street, coughing, her crew battered but alive. The mob had thinned, Ezekiel's hold weakening as the fire's devastation sank in. But Sarah had no time to savor the shift. Dawn was breaking, and Harrow would come for her verdict soon. She needed a miracle, at least a plan. She gathered her crew in the stable, the strange machine humming faintly behind them, Its metal surface gleamed in the dim light, its gears and wires a tantalizing puzzle. Sarah's fingers itched to investigate, but the plague came first. "We've got one day," she said, her voice steady despite her exhaustion. "We moved the quarantine to Massachusetts ward that warehouse we set up. We double down on hygiene, push the salves, and pray it's enough." Tom frowned, wiping soot from his brow. "Harold want numbers, mistress. How many saved?" Sarah's jaw tightened. "Hundreds if we're lucky, but we need to show him control fewer new cases, more recoveries." Eliza, stitching a fresh mask despite her blistered hands, snorted. "And Ezekiel? He'll say ye caused the fire." Sarah's eyes darkened. "Let him. He's losing the crowd. We focus on results." She assigned tasks: Mary to rally families, Will to scavenge supplies, Tom to guard the warehouse. Eliza, ever practical, suggested a bold move: parade the healed through the streets. Let 'em see your work. Sarah grinned, a spark of her old humor returning. "A PR stunt? Eliza, you're speaking my language." The day was a grueling marathon. Sarah led her crew to the warehouse, a cavernous space now lined with straw pallets and steaming kettles. She worked like a woman possessed, triaging patients, mixing salves of honey and garlic, teaching hand-washing until her voice cracked. Her cosplay, quip about the beaked masks resurfaced, lightening the mood as Will mimicked the doctor's waddle, earning laughs from the sick. But every hour brought new cases, and Sarah's hope frayed. Without antibiotics, she was fighting a war with sticks and stones. By afternoon, word of her work had spread beyond the ward. Families from neighboring streets arrived, begging for help, their trust in Ezekiel waning as Sarah's recoveries mounted. She'd saved over 100, with dozens more stable drop in London's plague-ridden bucket, but a beacon in this ward. Yet Ezekiel wasn't idle. He'd shifted tactics, spreading rumors that Sarah's salves were devil's brew, her masks a trap to mark souls for Satan. When a group of his followers tried to storm the warehouse, Tom and his cudgel sent them packing. But Sarah knew the cunning man was biding his time. As dusk fell, Harrow arrived, his velvet cloak a stark contrast to the ward's squalor. Flanked by guards, he surveyed the warehouse, his cold eyes missing nothing. "Well, Colonial?" he said, his voice dripping with skepticism. "Have ye stopped the plague?" Sarah stood tall, her dress torn, her face smudged with ash. "Not stopped," she admitted, "but slowed. Look around, fewer new cases, more recoveries. My methods work." She gestured to a group of healed patients, lined up at Eliza's urging, their faces proof of her success. Harrow's gaze lingered on a young girl, her buboes faded, her smile radiant. "Impressive," he conceded, "but the mayor wants miracles, not progress. And there's talk of witchcraft." Sarah's blood ran cold, but before she could respond, Ezekiel burst in, his face a mask of righteous fury. "She's no healer," he shouted, brandishing a vial of her salve. "This is sorcery! I demand her trial!" The crowd outside, drawn by the commotion, murmured, their faith wavering. Sarah's heart pounded, but she'd faced worse gunshot victims, crashing patients, her own leap through time. She stepped forward, snatching the vial from Ezekiel's hand. "Sorcery?" she said, her voice ringing with defiance. "This is honey and garlic, you fraud. You've let people die while I've saved them." She turned to Harrow, her eyes blazing. "Give me one chance to prove it. Let me treat your guards right now. If they're worse off, burn me. If they're better, You back me?" Harrow raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Bold, colonial. Very well." He summoned 2 guards, both feverish, their necks swollen. Sarah worked under the crowd's gaze, her hands steady as she cleaned their sores, applied salve, and ordered isolation. Ezekiel sneered, but Sarah ignored him, her focus absolute. Hours passed, the warehouse tense with anticipation. Then, a guard stirred, his fever breaking, his eyes clear. The second followed, his breathing easier. The crowd gasped, some falling to their knees, whispering of miracles. Harrow nodded, a grudging respect in his eyes. "Ye've earned your reprieve, Whitaker. The mayor'll hear of this." Ezekiel's face twisted, but he had no counter. The crowd turned on him, their cheers for Sarah drowning his protests. As he fled, Sarah felt a surge of triumph, but it was short-lived. The machine in the stable loomed in her mind, its hum a siren call. Was it her way home? And what of the plague, still raging beyond her ward? That night, as her crew celebrated with stolen ale, Sarah slipped to the stable. The machine glowed faintly, its symbols pulsing. She traced them, her fingers trembling. A shadow moved behind her, Will, his eyes wide. "Mistress, ye think it's magic?" Sarah shook her head, a smile tugging at her lips. "Not magic, Will. Science, and I'm going to figure it out." The hum grew louder, a promise of answer danger. Sarah's fight wasn't over, but she was ready for whatever 1,665 threw at her next. The moon hung low over London, its pale light cutting through the haze of smoke and despair that clung to the city's plague-ravaged streets. In the shadow of the ruined Rose and Crown Tavern, Sarah Whitaker stood before the mysterious machine in the stable, her heart a tangled knot of hope and dread. Its metal surface pulsed with an otherworldly glow, the faint hum that had haunted her dreams now a siren's call. She'd saved hundreds in this ward, defied Ezekiel Black's venom, and won a fragile reprieve from Alderman Harrow. But the machinian, this impossible relic of science or sorcery, was her only clue to returning home to Boston, to the life she'd been torn from. Yet 1,665 wasn't done with her, and the night was thick with secrets waiting to unravel. Sarah's wool dress clung to her sweat-damp skin, its neckline loosened to reveal the curve of her collarbone, a subtle defiance against the era's stifling modesty. Her sneakers, scuffed and muddy, were a rebellion in themselves, grounding her as she traced the machine's etched symbols. Her green eyes burned with determination, her auburn hair falling in wild waves over her shoulders. She was no damsel, no saint. She was a doctor, a fighter, a woman out of time, and London was about to learn what she was capable of. Her crew, Tom, Mary, Will, and Eliza, gathered nearby, their faces lit by the machine's eerie glow. Tom, his broad chest straining against his linen shirt, gripped his cudgel, his loyalty to Sarah unwavering. Mary, her simple dress cinched to accentuate her figure, clutched a linen mask, her gratitude for her son's life, a quiet fire in her eyes. Will, lean and boyish, his baker's apron tossed aside to reveal a taut frame, stared at the machine with a mix of awe and fear. Eliza, her seamstress's gown tailored to hug her curves, leaned against a beam, her sharp tongue silenced by the machine's mystery. They'd followed Sarah through fire and mob, and now they stood with her at the edge of the unknown. "Ye sure about this, mistress?" Tom rumbled, his voice low, his gaze lingering on Sarah's determined profile. She flashed a grin, her Boston bravado cutting through the tension. Sure? Hell no. But I didn't come this far to back down. Her fingers brushed the machine, and a jolt shot through her, the hum intensifying. Will gasped, stepping closer, his hand hovering near hers. It's alive, ain't it? Sarah nodded, her pulse racing. Alive or something else? Either way, it's our ticket to answers. But answers would have to wait. A shout shattered the night, followed by the clatter of boots on cobblestones. Sarah's crew tensed as a figure emerged from the shadows, a man in a hooded cloak, his face obscured, but his voice dripping with menace. Sarah Whitaker, he purred, stepping into the moonlight. The colonial saint. Or is it witch? Sarah's stomach twisted as the hood fell back, revealing not Ezekiel Black, but a stranger with sharp cheekbones and eyes like polished obsidian. His velvet doublet was unlaced, exposing a lean chest, his movements languid yet predatory. I'm Gideon Vale, he said, bowing mockingly. Alchemist, seeker of truths, and, let's say, keeper of this machine. Sarah's hand tightened on her stethoscope, her only weapon. Keeper? She snapped, her voice steady despite the chill creeping up her spine. Then explain it. What is this thing? Why am I here? Gideon's lips curled, his gaze raking over her with a mix of curiosity and desire. Patience, Doctor. This device, your core mythoigian, is no mere trinket. It bends time, plucks souls from one era to another, but it demands a price. He stepped closer, his breath warm against her cheek. And you, Sarah, are its latest debt. Her crew bristled, Tom raising his cudgel, but Sarah held up a hand, her eyes locked on Gideon's. Cut the cryptic crap, she said, her Boston edge sharp. If you know how it works, tell me. I've got a city to save and a home to get back to. Gideon chuckled, a sound that sent a shiver through her, no entirely of fear. Bold, he murmured. I like that. But the machine's secrets aren't mine to give. They're hers. He gestured to the shadows, where a woman emerged, her gown a cascade of midnight silk, her eyes glowing with an unnatural light. Meet Lysandra, Gideon said, the machine's true mistress. Lysandra's presence was a storm, her beauty both alluring and terrifying. Her dress clung to her like a second skin, its low neckline revealing a tantalizing glimpse of cleavage, her movements fluid as she circled Sarah. You've done well, Doctor, she purred, her voice a velvet blade. Saved lives, defied fools like Ezekiel, but the machine brought you here for more than plague curing. She leaned close, her lips brushing Sarah's ear. It seeks a guardian, and it chose you. Sarah's mind reeled, her body tense under Lysandra's gaze. Guardian? She said, stepping back, her voice firm. I'm a doctor, not a pawn in your sci-fi game. If this thing sent me here, it can send me back. Lysandra's smile was a predator's, her fingers trailing down Sarah's arm. Oh, it can. But first, you must prove worthy. The plague is your test, but there's more enemies older than Ezekiel. Threats beyond this ward. She gestured to the machine, its hum now a roar. Unlock its power, and you'll wield time itself. Fail, and London burns with you. Before Sarah could respond, a commotion erupted outside. Shouts, the clash of steel, the crackle of torches. The mob's back, Will cried, peering through a crack in the stable wall. Sarah's heart sank as she saw Ezekiel Black leading a larger crowd, their faces twisted with zeal. The witch hides in the stable, he roared, his robe billowing as he brandished a cross. "Burn it, and her blasphemy," Gideon smirked, unfazed. "Your cunning man's persistent," he said, drawing a slender blade from his belt. "Shall we deal with him, Doctor?" Sarah's mind raced. The mob, the machine, Lysandra's cryptic warning, everything was colliding. She turned to her crew, her voice a whip. "Tom, Will, bar the doors. Mary, Eliza, get the salves and masks. We're not losing anyone tonight." Then, to Gideon and Lysandra, she added, "You want me to prove myself? Help me stop this mob, or get out of my way." Lysandra's eyes gleamed with approval, while Gideon's grin widened. "A woman after my own heart," he said, twirling his blade. The stable became a fortress. As Sarah's crew braced for the siege, Tom and Will piled crates against the doors, their muscles straining, their shirts clinging to sweat-slick skin. Mary and Eliza distributed masks, their movements swift, their dresses swaying with each step. Sarah, her dress torn at the shoulder, exposing a glimpse of her toned arm, rallied them with honed calm. "We hold this ground," she said, her voice a beacon. "They want a witch? They'll get a doctor." The mob's torches lit the night, their chants a deafening tide. Ezekiel's voice rose above them, venomous and unyielding. "She consorts with demons. Burn her and her devil's machine." Sarah peeked through a slat, her stomach churning. The crowd was massive, fueled by fear and Ezekiel's lies. But she'd faced worse gunshot wounds, crashing patience, her own leap through time. She turned to Lysandra, her eyes blazing. "If this machine's mine to guard, show me how to use it, now." Lysandra's smile was enigmatic, but she stepped to the machine, her fingers dancing over its symbols. "It's not ready," she said, her voice low. "But it can, persuade." She pressed a panel, and the hum became a pulse, the air shimmering with energy. The mob faltered, some dropping their torches, their eyes wide with fear. Gideon laughed, leaping onto a crate, his blade catching the moonlight. "Behold the doctor's power," he shouted, his voice mocking. "Will you face her wrath?" The crowd wavered, but Ezekiel was relentless. "It's trickery!" he screamed, rallying them. A torch sailed through the air, igniting the stable's roof. Sarah's crew sprang into action, dousing flames with water they'd stockpiled. Sarah grabbed Gideon's arm, her touch electric. "We need to end this now." He nodded, his eyes locking with hers, a spark of something dangerous passing between them. "Then, let's give them a show." With Lysandra's guidance, Sarah activated the machine's outer defense, a burst of light and sound that mimicked a thunderstorm. The mob screamed, scattering as lightning seemed to crackle from the stable. Ezekiel stood his ground, his face a mask of rage, but even he retreated as the storm intensified. Sarah's crew cheered, their exhaustion forgotten, but Sarah knew it was a temporary victory. The machine's power was fleeting, its true purpose still locked away. As the mob dispersed, Sarah confronted Lysandra, her voice fierce. "You said I'm the guardian. What's the real test?" Lysandra's eyes softened, a rare vulnerability breaking through. "The plague was only the beginning," she said. "There are others, those who'd use the machine to shatter time itself. You'll face them, Sarah, or lose everything." She vanished into the shadows, leaving Gideon behind. He stepped close, his breath warm against her neck. "Find me when you're ready, Doctor," he murmured, slipping a small, engraved key into her hand. "The machine's secrets await." Dawn broke, and Harrow arrived, his guards in tow. He surveyed the stable, the scattered torches, the weary but triumphant crew. "You've tamed the mob," he said, his tone grudgingly impressed. "The mayor's pleased for now." Sarah nodded, her hand closing around Gideon's key. "Tell him I'm not done," she said, her voice steel. Harrow left, but Sarah felt the weight of Lysandra's warning. The plague, Ezekiel, the mob, they were battles. The war was something else. She turned to the machine, its hum softer now, its glow inviting. Her crew watched, their trust absolute. "What now, mistress?" Tom asked, his voice rough with pride. Sarah smiled, her fingers tracing the key's edges. "Now, we find out what this thing really does," she said, her eyes alight with curiosity. "And maybe, just maybe, I get home." But as she stepped toward the machine, a faint laugh echoed from the shadows. Lysandra's, or something older, darker. The key burned hot in her hand, and the hum shifted, a new rhythm promising wonders or ruin. Sarah's heart raced, her mind torn between Boston's skyline and London's chaos. Was she the machine's guardian, its prisoner, or something more? The answer lay ahead, in a story yet untold. What secrets does the machine hold? Will Sarah unlock its power, or fall to the enemies Lysandra warned of? The next chapter of her time-bending saga awaits, and trust me, you won't want to miss it. Head to my channel for the continuation of Sarah's thrilling adventure. Subscribe, and stay tuned for the next pulse-pounding installment.